Greetings, Warlords. Welcome to Saga Thursday, the show all about the skirmish miniatures game from Studio Tomahawk. Joined once again by fan favorite Steven. How's it going, man?
Doing pretty good. Doing pretty good.
Awesome. So the last time we had you on was Adepticon 2022. We had a little conversation. Was that a tournament win? I'm trying to remember now.
It sure was. That was for Age of Melee. I took the Merovingian Franks, and they performed as planned, and it went well from there. So
Okay, well, we got you back for another martial feat here. You took
right.
Best General in the Age of Vikings, and you were a bold man, Stevens. You took Vikings to the
I
Age
sure
of
did.
Vikings.
I did. You know, there's a lot of reasons for me wanting to take them. One I have to admit right away is that I needed to have some guys that I had ready because I was painting a whole Numidian army and a whole fantasy army and everything else in between.
Yeah,
So
definitely a
wanted to have
consideration.
guys that, a little less work there to get everything done. The scenarios kind of put me towards wanting to have a melee army too. There was that one where ranged kills counted as levy kills. I think that was what it was. And I usually play, a lot of people know I usually play a lot of big shooting armies and stuff too. Even though I think on your channel, I've been on more for Pagan Rus and a couple other finesses. So maybe that'll add to this one too. But finally, I wanted to pick something that I had not done well with before, or as a lot of players do, they want to pick something that will be surprising if it wins. And Vikings, as far as I know, have never won an Age of Vikings tournament that was of some degree, either a grand melee or another big tournament or something else like that. I think maybe Vikings have snuck in a couple wins in some of these 6-8 man tournaments at local clubs and stuff like that.
It's not recorded. Those are the Saga Dark Ages. Who can go by those accounts, Steven?
Right. Exactly. Those are the real Dark Ages in that case. So I wanted to. I've always insisted, as many have, that there's no army in Saga that is unplayable. There's no army that, if you tried hard at it or were practiced, that you were unable to win a tournament or win, at least play at a competitive level. Obviously, there are some warbands that are disadvantaged, usually just in the sense that they don't have enough, rather than they have just huge deficits that exist. And Vikings, then, was a great challenge in that case. I also think that usually Vikings are an army that you see with novice players when you get in. It's usually one of the main things that draws you to Saga, is some cool, ferocious dudes with round shields of whatever variety that you want. And I think after people get their feet under them, they often don't go back to the Vikings. They kind of view it as the amateur board because they've encountered the most amateurs with it. And they themselves were likely amateurs the last time they played it. And so a lot of reasons then I realized that if I could do well, that'd be quite a feather in my cap a little bit if I could do well with the Viking list.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I've dabbled with some Viking tournament play myself, and just kind of, even just adding a levy unit in there seems to kind of make a big difference to how you can play those guys. But I couldn't stay away from the Berserkers, Steven. Maybe it was a trap, maybe not.
It was a trap. So, I think the Berserkers are a great concept. You just have to have the right target for them. And as most players recognize very quickly, obviously they have no staying power. And if there is not an equivalent unit or a little bigger on the other side, there's no trade that you can make to get your points back for the Berserker. You don't want him to go crash into 7 warriors or something like that. You don't want to crash him into a levy unit and only kill 11 and then walk out with 1 Berserker or some other thing like that.
Yes.
But the concept is good in part, and that's something that I took to my Viking list, which is the theme of small tradable units up for bigger ones. And that was definitely the hallmark of the play there is kind of the missile carrier, and you're shooting off a few missiles of small packs of warriors and letting those guys really, really overachieve. And then also having some flexibility in the warband to open up potential for activations. Because one of the biggest problems, I think, for the Viking board is that there are no activation abilities other than Ragnarok down in the corner.
No efficiency there.
No efficiency. And so you have to try to find it somewhere. And so the fact that we had mercenaries available this year, I have to say, really helped me out. So I can't say that I won with a pure Viking board in that case, but I would also say that in the course of my tournament, my mercenaries were less of a factor than the other core aspects of my army. And some of that had to do with matchup and stuff too.
Okay. So what did you have to end up bringing then?
So I took 4 points of warriors, 1 point of javelin levy, and 1 point of Gate Hill mercenaries.
Awesome.
No Hearthguard in the list. And, you know, I think I could have found a spot later, but if the idea of the Viking board that I'm taking in is that I want to overachieve, then it's hard to start overachieving with Hearthguard in general.
Just not overachievers.
Exactly. You want to have a lot of times where each exchange that you put through is going to lead you up at least 2 points on each exchange if you can. And that's hard then with small units of Vikings, is that you may overachieve in the points, but you have to be very careful because you're also in slaughter points giving up an extra point every time that unit is wiped out. And you're also losing a point then if we're talking about survival points. So
yes,
you still can't just mindlessly go in and try to blow yourself up on the first thing that you can reach. You kind of have to calculate, because what looks like a blowout in your favor, you have to start to add up the 1, 1, 1, 1 for each one of the packs of your guys that you've thrown into the fire a little bit.
Okay. So what you mentioned, smaller units, were you using the same kind of configuration in each game? Would that change?
It was. And you know, interestingly enough, the stuff that I practiced for this, I did not encounter at all. I was the main question, which if we were playing a 6-day tournament, I would have got to find out on the next day versus Monty with his Welsh, is how do the Vikings deal with Welsh?
Yes.
And basically any Age of Vikings warband is going to come in and need to answer that same question, because if you don't have a plan for the Welsh, you're not going to be able to pull through at the top tables for the most part, because at almost any Age of Vikings tournament, somewhere in the top tables is 1, 2, or 3 Welsh players usually hanging out. And if they didn't bring their Welsh, they brought the Scots. And so that's another, that's the other one.
Yeah, another tricky one, yeah.
So I practiced against some mounted guys, some shooting guys, a little bit of the Hun play there with Charles. And we did against Scots as well, because Scots were the other thing, is that everyone in Age of Vikings has had a great attack salvo that just ends in nothing on the Scots pretty much. You give up everything and you get nothing back pretty much.
Well, you lose your unit,
right?
Usually too.
Exactly.
So
you lose everything. So in the Gate Hill, then we're pretty important for that part. But I guess I'll move on to them in a second and fixate back on the Warriors. So I would do 4 small packs that in principle was 4 units of 6. But in some scenarios, the flexibility would be to drop 1 from each of those squads and put it on the remaining 8-man warrior unit that's sitting back there. So that last warrior unit can be either 8 men or 12 men, depending on how many guys you want to pull off the little Tomahawk missiles pretty much. And the way that you make that decision is trying to assess how much shooting potential the other army has. Or, for instance, if you're going up against Yom's Vikings or something like that, things like Northern Tempest, is that what it's still called? I think so. The shooting attack is great for just
Nordic Tempest, yeah.
And then big composite bow moves, which there's not a lot of in Age of Vikings, but just multiple shooters that could be Carolingians or something too. Just being able to take 2 warriors, 2 warriors, 2 warriors, and 2 warriors off all of your 5-man units. Well, they're wiped after that, so those usually stay as that 1 higher 6-man. And then usually the bulk warrior group in the back, because there is inevitably going to be some combats that you don't want to try to lose anything in. The fool's gold of the Viking board is often the ones that make you hurt yourself, or at least that's what lots of people have said beforehand. Valhalla, Heimdall, Ragnarok are the ones that we're really, really careful about, because while they have some pluses, we don't really know how it's going to pan out in the end. You may have hit really well, but if you're wiped out, it's just an even mix pretty much. So
well, that's cool. That's actually basically kind of identical to the last Viking loadout I was running.
Yeah, because I think it's pretty clear there, right? The small packs, they can really wipe out a lot.
Yeah, Heimdall, you can easily go from 5 to 10. You're not
Yep.
losing out there. And then that 12 pack, is basically, you can use those the exact same as Berserkers. You're almost getting just as many attacks as the Berserker. Yeah, I mean, so you could go in and triple Valhalla, get 21 attacks. If you're all fresh, you could even get a few more than that somehow. And if you need to throw everything into an 8-man Hearthguard,
Yep.
which is the dream Berserker prospect.
Well, in that case, I want to take those little 5- and 6-man guys and hit the 8-man Hearthguard.
That's even better. But
that's the potential there.
If you need to push it all in, it's basically the same as that Berserker unit. But in the meantime, you have 12 attacks. So you can do an Uller and a Thor play. You're not taking any damage. You're not lowering anything right there, and it's pretty darn good fight unit there. You just got to believe that those 6s are coming.
They are
deep down.
When you get a reroll, then it fixes a lot of problems in that case.
Yes,
and that's also, as a lot of Viking players have figured out, that's where the Javelin Levy come into play as well. Being able to have them be a focused delivery system for kind of an Uller Thor attack and have some follow-up shots at the end is one of their main purposes. Getting +1 on your attacks because of the javelins and being able to combine that with Thor and being able to combine it with Uller. If you're fighting against something that can't close ranks, they're shocked to find out that you walked into the fight with 4 attacks, but because you've played the whole combo, you've somehow hit them 11 times or something because of Thor, the +1s, all these sort of things too. And you probably have some shots there at the end. And so the levy.
And then you can even put in the 3 attack dice from, I can't think of the name now. I usually use it for the fatigue removal.
Frigg.
Yeah, Frigg. So you can go into a 7 on the levy with rerolls and popping double hits on 5. So you use the javelins primarily for the levy every game?
Always,
or would you?
Always, because the other purpose for them to me is the armor 4 against shooting. And we can use them as a really familiar screen as we can in a lot of other war games. In Saga, that's a little bit harder because it's easy to get tied up on your own units. And if you are screening with levies, you're also seat belting in your own Vikings that you're protecting at the same time. But if you have to weather a couple rounds of shooting to close the distance, or you need to create a different type of threat while your Gale Gatehill are soaking up some of the attention, the levy are great for protection. They're great for a hidden hit that's poked in there. And with the new Javelin rules, there's a lot of times, since you're kind of keeping combat pace with the rest of your army, you might start inside of range with your javelins already, be able to activate the shoot, and then get your free shot right afterwards, using a dice first and then your free shot. That's 12 attacks of range shots coming out of the Viking board that usually you don't expect to ever potentially receive 12 shots from the Vikings, especially on a big combat-looking build.
That's good. Glad to hear. Yeah, being able to shoot if you need to and attack if you need to, whichever one they weren't planning for is the one that'll probably happen, right? So.
And I think another key for the Viking board, too, is that with the exception of what we were just talking about with the levy, there's not really anything that requires the Vikings to charge to do as well as we're talking about.
Yes.
There are a lot of guys, Goths are a great example. One of the mainstays is going to be Cunius or whichever. You have to be the attacker in that. You have to set it up on your terms in order to get the most of that offensive potential. The Vikings can go walk up and sit directly there. And while you might have the temptation to close ranks, you normally can still hit that, that 5-man unit still goes up to 10 attacks with Heimdall. He's still going to reroll with Uller. He's still going to get bonus hits with Thor. So that's the counter a lot of times. The only thing you have to deal with is a loaded board on the other side. But even though we've added such crazy offensive things in Saga over the years, and people have a lot of thoughts about the potentials in Age of Alexander and stuff, at the end of the day, there's still not too many things that can compete with 5 extra attacks, re-rolling all of your attacks, and your 6s turn into 2 hits, all combined together for 2 commons and 2 uncommons. That's still great dice economy for what it does when we're talking about big punches.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still hard to compete with, even the late days. So I really think those are some of the shining points of the board. Valhalla, you know, in first edition, Valhalla was the way to go. That's still, I was big 12-man warrior units. You play Valhalla, you get as much attacks as possible, and you just enjoy swimming in attack dice and picking your targets. But in practice and in nothing else, I think I've only used Valhalla once as a defensive ability, and it was because I had nothing else left, and there was a little 3-man unit that it was remaining that was going to get charged the next turn, and he's a nice target for Valhalla, so I usually have stayed away from it.
All right. Well, before we get into the first game, what are the thoughts on Ragnarok then?
So Ragnarok is definitely situational. I think people get really excited to see 2 6s, 2 rares or siegs or whichever, and put it on there. Scream out the cry Ragnarok. People were coming up to shame me because I did not scream out Ragnarok in the course of the tournament.
Okay, I was gonna ask that. I was gonna say
I didn't play
think
Ragnarok
I heard you.
in the tournament,
Okay.
so
We would have known. Yeah.
That's a pretty big cost for a pretty situational or thematic thing to do at certain points. And if I would have gone up against a very big Hearthguard list, and I would have ended up in a right phase where I have 2-3 units that can get in there, some follow-ups, maybe the Galegate Hill are still alive, then I'm looking at Ragnarok. In practice, I did have a couple really fun Ragnaroks where it surprised me because I usually avoided the ability in the past. And especially against Scott's Hearthguard build, suddenly all those guys being armor 4 and having 6 something attacks or activations in a phase, that's a really big deal.
So yeah, absolutely. The activations are the star there. I think of Ragnarok as kind of that your reward if you just play it cool and just move the line up, get everybody within range. You got your abilities queued up for when they come in. And if you can roll 6 or 7 or 8 dice on that one turn when all the battle lines are within medium of each other, and that shows up, you know something's going to happen that turn.
Oh, yeah. But that's the point, really, right? Fate, the Norns have to have a hand in that all.
Yes, you can never just count on it.
And if you're parking 2 rares on there, just waiting for the right moment, I think you're hamstringing yourself bad, because you kind of come into the Viking list hoping that you're generating 8 Saga dice with all those small units and everything else combined, 8 Saga dice, but you're going to be down to 5 Saga dice halfway through the game almost every time,
pretty
even if
quick,
your plans are going perfect. So if you're stashing Ragnarok the whole time, same with Odin in that case too, right? Odin is probably one of the best shooting reactions in the game, but it takes 2 dice away from you. And in a board that doesn't have activations, sometimes it might pay to just take it on the chin and move forward. It's another thing if you're going up. If I had to play myself with my Merovingian list from last year, right, I'd be terrified of Odin. I'm terrified my super shooting Hearthguard unit's going to get stranded and he's going to get eaten up. But at the same time, I think I would take Biting Cold or whatever it's called here in the old Pagan Rus over Odin any day, pretty much.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, it can be double-edged there, Sometimes as the shooting player, you're okay with them just leaving those up there, know, and kind of going a different approach. So, mixed bag. All right. So, Adepticon time. You are coming in. You played the 3 previous days, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we got our game in.
We sure did.
In the Magic time.
I had a great time in Magic. I took Great Kingdoms, but under the guise of a lost Civil War unit that disappeared briefly in Tennessee and shows up through a portal and must fight its way through goblins and demons and whatnot. And I had a great time. That was probably one of the funnest days. So
absolutely, good game there. So, how were you feeling by the end? Were you worn down to a nub, or were you heightened to a razor's edge of Saga?
Things had kind of been a little bad luck on the first day. A little bit of my own hubris, I think, got me into some trouble with old Terry Donner, and he was thrilled to be able to get the opportunity to not let up from that a little bit, and he beat the pants off me there a little bit there too. And then I went up against my old clubmate there, Charles, and I was kind of out of it by that point by my spiraling Numidian loss. But Charles really kicked my teeth in as well too. So I had two pretty strong ones coming out of there too. Age of Magic though put my fire back in, was wonderful, great time. And then we did really well in the doubles, also getting best general in the doubles tournament as well.
Yeah.
And so we were feeling pretty good going into that. But I was nervous, man, because I knew exactly what type of challenge I had taken. And I was pretty confident with my Numidians in the first day, very confident even, maybe too confident in them. And so in my mind, predicting all this stuff, I was going to win with my Numidians, do pretty good with the other 2 days, and then the Viking day was just going to be who knows where it was going to go. But I was going to pad myself with a lice and antiquity success or something. But so yeah, I was a little worried. I knew it was going to go down to matchups, and when I got my first matchup then, which was Paul with Pagan Rus, I said, oh, crap, I didn't practice against these guys at all. I didn't think about fighting other infantry armies, really, except for the Scots. I practiced against horse armies, activation reaction armies, and mixed bag armies, because that's what I thought the Vikings were going to struggle with against. So maybe I lucked out in that way, too, because Vikings do great in an infantry fight. But if you listen to my own testimonies of the Pagan Rus in my last
I was going to say,
they're the best.
You were the person in the Pagan Rus faction review.
Yeah,
so
exactly. I was
thing
thinking,
or two.
I wonder if Paul watched that, and so I was like, "What did I say in this? How can I go against what I had advised?"
That's right. Yeah, and kind of play into.
So most importantly, the threat for Pagan Rus for me was biting cold, taking my Galegate Hill completely out of the fight, pretty much, because as soon as they get rolling, they're done for the turn every single time. And so my trick of using them is not just the Galegate Hill being a very good mercenary unit, which they're probably the best mercenary unit in Age of Vikings anyway. I think you could talk about a couple others, but most people would keep them on the short end. Yeah. It's not so much the offensive potential of the Galegate Hill. It's the fact that you will force your opponent to clear their defensive abilities off their board by necessity, pretty much, as soon as you start to push those guys in. And they take no Saga dice to do it. So against Scots or Pagan Rus, who doesn't have Biting Colt up, or someone else with a pretty great defensive combo, you can activate, and then most likely you'll have an empty board and all of your Saga dice still placed on your own abilities to get whatever you were hoping to have accomplished done that turn. And if they decided that they did not want to stop the Galegate Hill, well then great, the Galegate Hill will probably do a lot of damage in the meantime.
It's time. I'm sure there's always a few tentative charges before the Galegate Hill. It was like, do you want to cancel? Like, I'm gonna activate. Are you gonna cancel? Like, you want to cancel this? It's just like
exactly. And so it went pretty good. This was, I'm trying to think of the scenario. This was kind of like feasting and pillaging, pretty much.
Yes.
3 objective markers in the middle, and you have to grab the objective markers, and you score.
You score 1 per turn per round. At the end of the round, you get kind of a tournament point for each one that you hold. You're trying to kill the enemy warlord. So this one's kind of interesting because, it's that short deployment. We got two armies that kind of have to run up the old-fashioned way.
I was pretty worried with that tight deployment because it was the ideal frozen wind target, right? You could just set that ruler down and hit every single unit that was on there. And I thought, oh my God, if he gets the first turn with this, he's going to blast me away pretty much. Okay. So it didn't end up happening though.
A bid to take place? What?
It did. I ended up bidding, and gosh, now you know what? God, we're so far from it. I'm trying to remember how it went. I think I ended up bidding 1, and Paul bidding 1 as well, and then we rolled off. And Paul started the game, I believe, and that's something I was again then worried about getting blasted at the beginning. But I think he did have common, uncommon, and could have probably blasted me then too. But you also have to kind of get in position on that.
You got to make a run. You know.
And I I think I would have blasted me for sure.
Sure.
And they just kept it back there, but progressed out pretty well. Maneuvers and all of that space meant that I was going to get into position pretty quickly, and he was a little more hesitant to get within charge range of the whole Viking shield wall, pretty much. He had I think, pretty much the list that I had said in the past there, right? 2 points of Hearthguard, 3 points of Warriors, 1 point of Levy is what I think he took.
Okay.
And so that's a list I'm very familiar with, too. And so I was a little worried about being able to get up there in good time, or him using, what's it called? The one where we create difficult terrain around very short of a unit, because I think it was going to be such a clogged fight that even though I don't know if you could have predicted it at the start of the round, there's going to be so many opportunities where there's crisscrossing units and I'm trying to pick through his guys.
Definitely.
I was worried about that, even one of those really valuable activations. But pretty soon into the game, I had my first opportunity to grab some Hearthguard, and I also moved the Gale Gatehill up to continue to force him to have to use Biting Cold over and over again on him, until just inch by inch they got into range and kicked everything off, charging into some warrior squads there too. And honestly, the Gale Gatehill did not really exceed in combat too much through any of my games. I will say that later on in this game, though, was probably one of my luckier events, one later on with Eric too. Paul came up to charge the 4-man Gale Gatehill with his warriors. I hit all 4 on his empty warlord. He hit with 4, I think, back to me. Gave him the obligatory 2 auto hits plus 4. Failed all of them and wiped the warlord. And I think he wiped the Gale Gatehill as well in that case. But for tournament points, sometimes getting those warlords is pretty hard.
Yeah,
if someone knows they're going to keep them in the back. A little extra effort
there if you can, can swing it, maybe.
Luck of the dice there a little bit. I'll say that had no part in me, and only in getting some good dice rolls on that part. So you can summarize that game, though, to say that I closed the distance pretty quick, was able to grab 2 out of 3 objectives pretty much within the second turn or so and keep them kind of babysat. And from then, I just had enough points to keep pushing through. I was getting the types of exchanges that I was hoping for. Those Hearthguard went down to a 5 or 6 man warrior unit, I think. And I think that left 1 or 2 of them left. But in general, I got a lot of the exchanges that I was hoping for. And was thrilled to have made it through without getting completely stuffed by my own combos. Not my own combos. Again, there's a little bit of that's just straight up arrogance to say that was the case. But
you're in the faction review, so you're the man when it comes to the ruse. So,
and actually, Paul got hung up for one of the moments that I think I talk about in there, which is you're trying to do this mental math of subtracting your armor, adding your armor, getting dice, losing dice, and ultimately you end up coming back to normal, and you've spent like 3 Saga dice. He was going down that pathway and realized it at the last moment and said, no, what am I doing? Okay. And just play a couple of these. So, but yeah, I was pretty pleased to get out there. I will say at the end, I had an opportunity to hold on to one of the objectives, and Paul even told me, like, should hold on to that objective. That 1 point might be a big deal for you later on in the tournament. He was able to push me off of it, so I actually can't say that I held on to it through some sort of strategy or something. But I didn't get that point, and later on, that's a factor. Moving it down the line, then
come back to haunt you. Okay.
Yep.
Well, yeah, it's funny, a lot of that stuff just kind of, there's a few dice rolls there can control the fate of the whole event there for sure. So you didn't know it at that time, but might have been one of those moments there where.
And I still tried to have it. He got me off of it at the end of the day. So even if I had declared nothing's taking this from me, Paul still pushed me off of it at the end. So he had a good little final push. So
awesome. Well, good deal. Glad to hear you had a good game. So coming into round 2, the scenario for this one was, we kind of mentioned it earlier, anything killed by shooting counts as levy, and we're using diagonal deployment.
Yep.
And I think that's it. There's nothing.
And you have to be outside of your deployment at
okay.
the end of the game, or else those guys count as eliminated, I think. And it is a massacre point. It's basically Clash, but diagonal and against shooting a little bit.
So get out of your deployment zone.
Yep,
Don't hunker
that's already
down.
what I want to do anyway. So
And if you're getting shot at, maybe it's not as bad as it seems. Shooting at warriors, it probably works. You lose a point or two. It's just shooting at the Hearthguard, or especially the Warlord. You got to think twice. Definitely weaken them and finish those guys off in melee. So who was the big draw for round 2?
A guy named Jeff. He's been around a couple times there, and he had Anglo-Danes. And then I thought to myself, no. So you hear Anglo-Danes and you think, good, because just like Vikings, Anglo-Danes are also not very respected as far as their competitive play. But at the same time, Anglo-Danes are not respected in their competitive play a lot, in part because they're tooled up to beat up Vikings pretty much. And so I said, I had that realization, and I said, yes. And then I said, oh no, I beat Vikings all the time with Anglo-Danes. I hope that's not how it's going to go right now, because just their ability to reroll defense dice and their ability to increase their armor, even though those are 2 dice heavy abilities, that takes 4 dice to do that. And if you count my combo, Heimdall, Thor, Uller, that's also a 4 dice combo. Those 2 kind of cancel each other out pretty much.
They can, yeah.
And so that was something I was a little hesitant about. The other thing that I realized as we got in there, another ability I don't respect very much usually, which is Intimidation, I think it's called.
Yeah, that one will add up on you.
Well, with the Gale Gatehill, they're required to go first.
Ooh, so they're always going to get it, yeah.
Yeah, so they always have to be the guys to hit that if you want to use them. So there's a couple turns where they just have to sit there because I can't afford to have them start accruing fatigue for nothing, basically.
Yeah,
and so you focus in on saying, well, I guess I'll get to you turn 2 or 3, or hope that they don't put Intimidation later on. Intimidation is easy enough to get rid of if you have guys in maneuver range, which is the classic thing to do.
Yes.
You wiggle those maneuver guys, there's my fatigue, and now I can focus on what I'm really trying to do this round. And usually your Warlord, the next turn, will be in range to determine. Well, Viking Warlord's usually shooting guys out every turn. He doesn't have as much time to rest guys, but maybe you'll get Njord or something like that and pull it off in the back. So yeah, those 2 factors alone said, this is one, not what I played against, and my principles for how I want to succeed already kind of have some speed bumps on the way. Luckily, though, it's Clash, and boy, I got a lot of, that's the boxing match of Saga, and I got a lot of boxing experience in that case. So
right.
And I knew that there was an experience divide between me and my opponent. And I knew that I just wanted to kind of try to take advantage of that as quickly as possible and try to put the gas on. And I set up pretty long middle deployments. He kind of denied one flank, which is probably smart because he took a couple of the Viking missiles out of range, sort of. But it also kept him, though, pretty bottled up. And I got to square the Gale Gatehill right in front of them and some of the other charging units, too. And the game kicks off, and after I get over what I described with the intimidation thing, how am I going to get past this intimidation? Eventually, you just have to kind of bite it and get those guys up and in there.
Yeah, when it's time, yep.
And so I had a long play with a warrior unit following the Gale Gatehill on a turn that they overactivated, and I think I exhausted him out that turn. I think that he did not burn because it was not a small enough unit, but really I just needed my Gale Gatehill to get out of the way. And so I think he thought it was less important maybe to burn on that one. Or at the same time, when you burn with Gale Gatehill, you have to recognize that you have a unfatigued Gale Gatehill sitting within charge range.
Right, so we had a little power outage there, a little Nordic Tempest. The Yams Vikings are coming down, trying to stop the transmission. And so we lost a little bit there, but jumping back in, Anglo-Danes, the Gale Gatehill, we're up to some kind of shenanigans here.
Right. So I'm able to eventually, like I said, overcoming my intimidation obstacle, line up Gale Gatehill and warrior packs to come in on my right, his left, and he was pretty back up against the board there too. I was able to pop a couple units there, put some fatigue around, and then by the time his Hearthguard and stuff moved up too, they had just entered into the L range, basically, which is the charge range of Vikings in that case. So I was able to just continue to launch the missiles off the ship pretty much. And
fire!
At a certain
Fire
point,
1! Fire 2! Fire 3!
almost all of his guys were bottled up within probably an 8x8 corner of the table. And so everything was just super tight up there, and I was able to just keep pretty much hitting all the charges that I wanted. And ultimately, I killed every model of that game.
Oh, nice.
And boy, you don't get to do that as often these days.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is, but I just feel like we don't, maybe we're all getting better and stuff like that. But every single model was defeated.
That is amazing. So yeah, congrats. Very well done. That definitely
shot me up in the old massacre points section as well,
because I think so. That that's an area every 10 points killed is a point.
Right.
Right? So, perfect timing.
Yep, I got as much as I could possibly get out of that one. Couldn't be more pleased. Again, though, even though I wiped out everything, I mean, I got as big of a massacre as I could, I still think I lost over half of my army. And, you know, it's kind of like playing Mutatawiya or something else like that, where it's another sacrificial army, but you have to think about the best ways to minimize your sacrifices rather than to completely eliminate the possibility that you will make sacrifices. And I think that's kind of like Yom's Vikings in that case. You're playing against them. People talk about always, never, ever give them wrath or one way or the other. And really, it's a balance somewhere in the middle of both of these things. You don't want to give up what you don't have to. But if you see a good target, always take it. So
absolutely. All right. Wow. Nice big tromping win there in the middle. Feeling good. 2 wins.
I was feeling great. Stomping around. Looked like most of Kansas City was doing pretty well, too. This year, we had the most club members come up. We had 5 guys. One of those guys has an asterisk because it is Josh, who is up from your guys' lands as well. So he's kind of a free agent right now, I think. He's in our lands, so he's a Kansas City guy.
And man. He earned his stripes on Thursday.
It's been really great. I've really focused in, too, on, over the last year, we've added a lot of new guys, and we've tried to focus on building things up, helping people's games and stuff. But I definitely noticed that put back my own competitive edge a little bit. A lot of guys in the Adepticon world know my good buddy, Sean Dilley, and excellent player. When Sean and I will sit down, especially back in the day, because he's been doing some other stuff, but very, very competitive, very aggressive. We know that if we make a millimeter of a mistake, the other guy is going to take advantage of it, and not because we are hard-nosed and red-faced while we're playing. We're drinking just as many beers and laughing just as much as everybody else, but your guard is up and everything's dialed in a lot more. Our own game and stuff like that, in Age of Magic, launching creatures up at the end, all these kind of types of things where you say, like, this is stuff that if you were in a little bit more heightened environment, you probably wouldn't make some of these. So it was really good, though, to see that all of Kansas City was performing great. Our newest member, Britt, was middle of the pack the entire time. And there's some guys that have come to Adepticon for 6 years and remain at the bottom part of the half with a smile, of course. So I was just really pleased to see how that was going. And second game, then I'm definitely glowing as I'm walking out and seeing what's next. Monty was also smashing his games. And so I thought, is this going to be the case? Is it going to come down to me and Monty?
The Welsh? Is this going to be it?
And I've been beaten by those Welsh models before, but not by Monty piloting them. John beat me with those guys last year in my put down my Vikings run in Age of Vikings last year with those same models. And so I thought, here we go again. Oh, no. These guys are going to square up, and Monty's going to kill me with a smile. Because whenever I've met Monty at the last tables, usually he beats me. So that's the way it goes. He might try to say otherwise or something, but he's got a great record against old me. That's for sure.
Okay. Round 3. So this one was new feud. So it's got the challengers, and there's a hill in the middle of the table. and you're trying to get your challenger onto the hill. If you have the soldier or counselor, you score a bonus point every time they are on the hill at the end of your turn. If you have the brute, you score nothing, but you get the brute, so that's pretty good. And then if you have one of the other three, you score two bonus points per turn. So did you already know which one you wanted going in? So,
I did. I wanted the counselor. Counselor gives another we obey. And that's vital, like I said, in an activation choked warband a little bit.
Absolutely. And a Saga die too, if I'm not
and a Saga die. And so, like I said, you're trading at least one of those Saga dies pretty much right at the first chance that you get in the game. So it was nice to have that as a backup. And it's a bonus that he can score a point too. Didn't end up being as big of a factor in this game with Eric Hagen, who was my last opponent.
Eric Hagen coming in round 3 now,
and he shows up also with Anglo-Danes. And so
this is the most Age of Vikings event or run for you that you could get. Pagan Race.
Well, something that was really cool is that if you were to, on a gut whim, try to pick like the 3 bottom boards of Age of Vikings, and you look through everybody, a lot of names that would come up are Vikings, Anglo-Danes, and Last Romans. And Vikings, Anglo-Danes, and Last Romans were all on the top tables pretty much, with Welsh tucked in there too.
A couple tables down, squaring up against Josh with his Last Romans.
Last Romans right there. So
some people wouldn't be scared, but I was running the Saxon board with Germanic peoples, so I didn't really have any shooting defense, so I was scared.
Well, and I don't know how much it came into your own game, but again, Josh is a sharp and clever player. My own worry playing him in the clubs and stuff. And I got caught with some stuff because I don't really play against Last Romans. And so he nailed me and beat me with stuff that I really didn't consider at the time. And I'm glad it happened so that I was a little bit more aware going into the tournament. But just being able to pull a charge into someone else.
One of the clutch abilities of that board, and something that I had to deal with for our game. But we're talking classic Vikings, Anglo-Danes.
There it is.
Once again.
And so I gave you my assessment of Anglo-Danes right beforehand, which is they got all the tools to beat Vikings. They have a setup that just really works to compete. For the reasons they're easy to steamroll by other armies, they are not much so, I think, with Vikings in that case. And Eric, despite being a little rusty coming back into Saga, is a very capable player. And so I knew that was a difference coming into that round too. And he had been doing great. He's also at the top board in this case. He'd also been cleaning up opponents with Anglo-Danes. And honestly, Anglo-Dane players came out ferociously this year, I feel like, because there was DJ Andrews a couple tables down, who also was on a dead set mission to try to have his Anglo-Danes do well. So I feel like there was kind of a theme of this year's Adepticon, which is taking these like underdog armies or unheard of armies and trying to make a name out of them a little bit.
We really had a good mix of armies this year.
I think there's everything but Norse Gales, is that right? And maybe no Moors?
I think so. No more than 3 of the same faction.
There's only 3 Vikings players this year.
That was unusual. Yeah.
Right.
Based off that number, there should have been 8 or 9 Vikings.
I was going to say. So new feud. I chose the counselor. He chose the brute, and he chose the brute before we even set up terrain or anything.
Okay, that is
before we even rolled. He sat down. He pretty much said, "I'm taking the brute," and so you say like, "Oh, great, he's got a plan, or he's at least got some bloodlust in him." He sat down a nice big bottle of Vikings blood mead and looked at me square and said, "I want some Vikings blood." And so I was destined to have a very good game, whether I got the hell kicked out of me or not. So I was really excited to be on the last table with Eric,
that's
especially because
perfect way to end the weekend. Really, it doesn't get any better
and you
than
guys
that.
get to see him up there, but he was such a regular force of all Adepticon leading up to COVID, and then separated a lot of us in that case. So I was really pleased to be there.
That's right.
So we square up. Then he did get first pick in this case, so that he could pick the brute as he wanted. And I also worried that he had some sort of trick lined up for me too. Not only that, because Dane Axes and the fatigue abilities of that board, even if you're just tossing down fatigue with trapped, what's their double Sutton Who ability called? Exhaustion. I was a little worried about exhaustion messing up some plays for me, and I already knew intimidation was going to mess it up. His Saga dice were fantastic for most of that game. He rolled rares every single turn, multiple rares most turns in that case, and so I always had to deal with intimidation.
Makes a
on a
difference,
rare,
yeah.
And a max board, and I will say that I was able to rely on the fact that Eric had been rusty on his own threat recognition, just like I was talking about, out of practice there earlier. But his Hearthguard got a little too close at the start of the game, just one little 4-pack. He had 3 points of Hearthguard, 3 points of Warriors, and chose the Brute. Mm-hmm. And one of those Danax Hearthguard groups, he had just little 4-man units of them out there, which is my favorite snack pretty much for the Vikings, especially the Danax guys, because they can't close ranks. You can really make sure you're going to maximize. Mm-hmm. And so I was trying to go mostly with 5s on this one, 5-man Warriors versus 6-man Warriors, to try to get as good of an exchange as I could with that. I got that first one. And you could see Eric kind of sit up a little straighter for a second and realize, like, I made a mistake leaving that guy out there. And so I could tell he was going to be a little bit more tenacious in the coming.
Yeah.
None of us really wanted to put our foot on the hill, pretty much. We both were right up at the periphery of the hill. I probably would have tried to sneak my counselor on maybe a little earlier and get some points. But in practice, old Josh there blew through some stuff on one of our practice games and got the counselor I think I was doing the trader that time, on like the 3rd turn, and it was really living in my mind a little bit, so I didn't really want him to be up there.
Yeah, so he doesn't have any defense. If you have no Hearthguard, he's just he's got resilience, but he's a little squishy, so even
he's
a little something into him, probably with 1 or 2 activations, could potentially take him down. And so you got to get some meat.
He looked like he wanted to trade with me for sure too. After I took that, he looked like like I said, it turned back into more of the boxing match sense, where it looked like he wanted to try to get a piece of his own right off too. But he squared up actually fairly defensively a little bit. I was able to kind of watershed moment then is really first turn, because I went second. First turn, I was able to grab a Hearthguard pack on turn 1. One of those guys just got a little too close, and I was just able to get there and got it. Second turn, I was able to push into the line a little bit more and try to go after some more of his Hearthguard. If I recall, that one didn't go as well for me, but what it did do was leave him sitting kind of straight in the middle with his Warlord, his Brute, and everyone else just kind of in a line, almost like you're picking them out for dodgeball or something like that. I want you, I want you, I want you. And there was a lot of fatigue on his units because I had blown up 1 or 2 smaller units in that zone and cast some fatigue around. Mm-hmm. He was focused on getting a lot of that stuff off of his armies or his guys and preparing for my following round. But he also then forgot to try to move his Brute back or measure to see if his Brute was in safety pretty much. Or Brute had a fatigue on him, I think was the case. And he was going to try to do something to get that off. And he didn't end up doing it, and I had to take that. And so I saw that the Brute was sitting there unsupported. Well, he's not supported anyway, I guess. He doesn't have bodyguards or anything like that. But basically one of the missiles got a target lock on him. Boop, 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 and we launched yelling Odin all the way over there and nailed it, and I got the Brute. Blew everything up. I was very happy with that. He was very dismayed with that, of course, because it was a slip up on his own part that I was even able to access the Brute to begin with. Mm-hmm. So as his wheel started to turn, he looked over at my counselor. Boom, and he went straight across like we just talked about and crushed my counselor just described. Same thing that Josh did to me pretty much in our practice games too. He barreled over there, double activated, and like we said, counselor can't stand up to anything. So
back to square one. So at this point, it's just a straight up fight for massacre points now. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! And so, in despite me picking all the targets that I want, I'm falling prey to what I was talking about with catching up to myself with those points for destroying entire units or whatever. And so I was starting to get a little nervous. we were coming down to turn 5, and we decided we got to count those points up, right?
Yeah, that's good. Good call. Good call. Yep.
Good call.
See where we're going.
And we were sitting pretty solidly in a draw range. Well, I should say I counted it up on my turn 2, and I was closing. And so I had to make a couple decisions. There's a few small packs of warriors I could try to grab. There was a bigger Hearthguard unit that I could try to grab. I could have made a charge on the Warlord, but he was in range of Hearthguard, so there's just no way I was going to pull that. And I was running on, I think, 4 dice. I was down to some brass tacks there, and it was a real struggle trying to determine which was the best one. I went for my easiest thing first, which was my Warlord and my Levy were in range of a 3-man warrior unit. Shot several times into them and charged them with the Warlord and did not kill them. But that was a little. I should say that was some tit for tat, because earlier in there, Eric had to play like 14 dice on my Warlord or something like that. My Warlord was armor 6 in it or whatever, but he also got no hits in there and really just only needed 1. So there was a lot of like big cliff moments or something. Where these
a lot riding.
So I failed to get that, and it was really down to whether I tried to get that little warrior man unit, which I think at this point, because I failed up top, I was starting to realize I needed to go for the Hearthguard pack in order to get the points.
Gotta get them somehow, yeah.
But the big worry, of course, with the Hearthguard pack is that they're going to swing back, and in a tie scenario on last turn, you might just stay at a dead tie, especially if you wiped my units, which I think it was a like 5 or 6 dudes available to go up into that squad. That would just be a flush, and this is the scenario where you have to roll for a turn 6. If we rolled for a turn 6, I'd be pretty happy. I think I could have tried to get a little bit more, but I made the right one. I had to think, right? I'll comment and pause to say that I think one of the biggest problems with people playing Vikings is that more so than any other army, we project the most romantic images onto the Viking board in a way that we don't do for lots of other war bands and stuff. Only to say that this fearless sort of mentality is what you're supposed to be going for in that moment. And so I reflected, though, with my own favorite passages from Have 'em All and other stuff. And one of the quotes that I yelled out loud at the start, and then I said then again before I was able to make my decision, was that a coward can't fight the fate that he was born for. If the coward believes that he will live forever, if from fighting he flees, but in old age he will know no peace, though spears have spared his limbs. And I definitely felt that moment there, so I had to charge the Hearthguard. Luckily, he killed some back, I killed some, but it was just 1 point. It all broke down so that I got the 1 point that I needed out of that exchange, pretty much, to put me over the top,
awesome,
into the win. And so I'm glad, even if I had failed in that moment, I would have been disappointed. But I was glad that all of Adepticon had led to this place where I have mead in hand, rosy-cheeked, sitting around. Everyone flanking me was good. Monty was sitting to my right. Monty actually painted my Warlord. I have several Viking Warlords, but cool. He had given me that Warlord as a wedding present last year. I was married last year, and so Monty had painted up this Viking Warlord and sent it to me. And so I had this, everything was in place, everything was good, and even if I had died on my spears there in that case, at least I would find a little bit of peace. And so it was I couldn't have had a better ending for, at least thematically, for my Viking run, for it to be that. And then well, I guess that's not really the end, right? I rolled the dice afterwards. It lands on a 5. We're done. We're done, finally. And I knew I was sitting high on points at that point, so I was going to go stare over at your game, stare at Monty's game, and see if Josh is going to get you one of the tricks there.
Yeah, didn't quite go through. He was a little aggressive. I was a little aggressive, and then probably by the time you came over, it probably wasn't looking so good for him, I'm guessing.
Right. Yep.
But
I had considered your list as well. Germanic peoples were the other thing that I had considered coming into this.
Yeah. So I think definitely like the Saxons are kind of the Vikings of the invasion age, and they're kind of maybe how you wish wish the Vikings were a little more like the Saxon, because you
I
do have
wish,
efficiency there.
right, they got the efficiency. I wish they had a little bit more teeth. The Saxon board. The Saxon board is very much a green dice board, and I mean all green dice boards other than the Goths in that case. But just a medium amount of offense, a small amount of offense.
There's some conditions kind of attached
right.
to almost every one of those. So every once in a while, you're like, this is this is not the kind of turn I want right now.
Right.
But so yeah, you got the win there at the end, and you were the undisputed best general with the Vikings in the Age of Vikings.
Well, like I said, though, that 1 point comes back to haunt me, right?
Yes.
I think you were 82 or 80 or 83.
82, yeah. So
82. I was 81. Monty also on an 81 there.
So it was
one more. You would actually still got me in that one anyway, though, because you would have got paint over me for sure. You guys were beautiful. So
well, thank you. Yeah, just sneaked it out. So depending on the timing of this, people may have seen that. I will record my thoughts on my games as well. And
I was going to ask if you've interviewed yourself yet.
the people demand it, so I gotta.
I'm curious for it. I'll be listening. So
make it happen one way or the other, and then we definitely Monty gave his top. Or his 3 games at Age of Vikings, so we kind of got everybody's perspective kind of going into that event, and maybe even I might try to get a hold of Eric, see if he's down for it. He ended up I think in the 4th there, even after all told and everything.
There's a lot of undefeated, not a lot, but I think there's at least 3 or 4 players, I think 4 players at least, that won all of their rounds. This is something that I really miss, the old style of Grand Melee where you have 6 days, because I'm obviously very happy with doing well on 3 days, but all of us know how quickly that changes in a 6-day spread or something.
It kind of
bomb all your next days and then just come out middle of the pack. Or there's been plenty of times on 6-day events where I've won 1, lost 1, and then was able to get 4 wins to pull it back up and still hit my spot or whatever. And so I don't know how we would do it though. There's too much Saga to play.
It's tight, yeah. We got too many ages now. And we kind of got to look to the kind of standalone 2-day events. I think. Hopefully in the future there we have more around the U.S. here. That'd be awesome to see. But overall, great weekend, right?
I got what I wanted to get out there, and I hope that especially a lot of good players, European community and stuff, your Discord already has had a good conversation back and forth about it and stuff too, but that's what I wanted. I wanted to show that Vikings can do it, because John Fry, not our John Fry, but Saga Rules Answer Man John Fry, took Vikings last year to the UK Grand Melee, and it was another deal. No one would say that John Fry doesn't know the rules or have the strategic acumen to get in there and win it. So we were all watching, right? And I was glad to have my own run anyway, where got everything done, won all my games. In practice leading up, when I was trying to convince because I think I needed to convince myself before I was able to try to bring it to the table. I still believe no matter what, all Saga armies can compete against each other. Pretty much no matter what, there will be advantages and disadvantages. But ultimately, if you are a solid player and the dice are forgiving, right, you will be able to
usually play with it's no bad luck. Good luck can come, that's fine, but bad luck, just stay away. If I could just roll what I'm supposed to, that's good enough to see me through.
So I hope to see it'd be great to see Age of Vikings win somewhere. Age of Vikings should get won by Vikings, right? At some point, it needs to have it on the track, and maybe that's how I'll pick everything next year. Is I'm just going to pick whatever is the name of the book. So we got Macedonians for one,
Crusaders,
right? Crusaders. We got Carthaginians, and we got Vikings.
Yeah,
so I guess
it easy. Yeah,
the invader. I don't know who'd be Age of Invasions.
Just one of the barbarians.
In that time period, right?
You got your pick there. I think
got your Huns, and
you're good. Okay, well.
So it was a great run. I also, one of the other big regrets that I have is that several years ago when Bill Thornhill was starting his Viking line with Footsore, because he's done a couple of Vikings. He had sculpted up a model of me in all of my stuff, and it is. I'll try to remember what the name is. You can tell it's me though, because anyone who's been around me in my kit all the time, I always hook my thumb into my wolf fur as I'm standing there for one of my poses. And so look for the only Footsore guy who has his hand hooked into his wolf fur.
I will, yeah, after this.
And so that's me. And I felt like, what a shame that I did not dress up in my stuff and play that warlord at the same time. But boy, I stayed up before I got into the car for Adepticon, as is normal for me. I stayed up for 18 hours painting. I got home from work and painted until I got into the car to leave, pretty much.
Yeah, I've been there. So
that's every Adepticon for me, though, I think. So
nothing like starting a tournament weekend completely exhausted.
Yep, I know it, man. And but you know, that's how it was for World Cup too, right? Only the Americans had to deal with the crushing jet lag. As we went over there too. It was horrific jet lag. You're just at all the worst times of day. Whereas if it's the other way around, coming to the United States, it's a late night or something like that. So,
all righty. Well,
thanks for having me on, for sure.
Definitely.
I hope that I've motivated a couple more Viking players to give it an earnest go, or rather, the different veteran players, if you consider yourself a good player, try it out. Try to find out what the other best dude at your club is playing, and do 5 games and see how you do with Vikings.
Yeah.
And I think, just like we talk about Raw Saga and other stuff, being able to do well with Vikings, I think, is a good practice tool for doing well any aspect of Saga, pretty much.
Definitely. And too, I commend you for, you can. There's different mindsets you can take when you come to these events. So you can go overall, I'm going in to win the whole thing, and I'm going to take the best army to do that. But you can just pick a certain faction, and it's going to be the best. This is going to be the best Viking run there's ever been. Whether I win it all or not. And so I think that's a good approach to take. So. If anybody has any thoughts about what they heard, definitely comment below. Hit up Steven here. He's on the. I see him pop up on that Discord from time to time.
Yep, I'm on there. I'm reading at the very least, and I'll be on there tonight. Well, I guess this will be shot afterwards, but I'll be on there for the last round of the Tabletop Simulator tournament, or at least the division.
Cool. Yeah, it sounds like you're doing well there. So
absolutely, doing even better there.
Maybe I'll interview the winner of that one. So maybe you'll be back on for that one. I do want to thank. Terry, Patrick, Sean, Mitchell, Kevin, Scott, and all the other patrons over at Patreon for making this video happen. Wouldn't be doing it without those guys for sure. So if you haven't yet, definitely head on over to the Discord, check out the Patreon stuff. But we're gonna call it here, man. Thanks again, Steven, for getting into this, and hopefully we'll see you again sometime.
All right. Can I say one closing word?
Yeah. Or
let's see. Hold on.
Multiple, if you like. He's coming in.
Saga. There it is.
Perfect. All right. See you later, folks.
All right. Take care.
Saga. If you'd like to see more Saga content, consider joining the Heathen Army over on Patreon, or popping on down to the Saga Thursday Discord server. Links below. Thanks, guys.